We know that Ohio State is still the odds-on favorite to win it all. We've seen Georgia win it all before. We know that Oregon fulfills the blue chip ratio and is top 4 in odds to win it all. So, what are the college football playoff scenarios that feature a team that would make history and defy previous rules about who can and who can't win it all? And who are the teams that would just be so out of left field for winning it all in a realistic way that we can create some chaos scenarios that don't feature the G5 team or don't feature Ole Miss without their head coach? Ones that are semi-realistic but very chaotic regardless. Well, I have a few, and I want to go through them very quickly. Firstly, we have a twist of the Lone Star Showdown. The Lone Star State is Texas. This is a matchup of two teams within the state of Texas, but it is not Texas versus Texas A&M. It is Texas A&M versus Texas Tech. The spread here based on FPI would be Texas Tech -4. Again, this is based on FPI. This is not hypothetical lines that books have released. Texas Tech would be favored by 4 here per FPI. What I would like in this matchup is both defensive lines against both offensive lines, where you get Cassius Howell against a Texas Tech offensive line that has really struggled at times protecting the passer and has been inconsistent, and you get a offensive line from Texas A&M that has been praised and would be the best O-line in this matchup against the best D-line in the matchup and the best D-line in America in Texas Tech. I would also get to see how Ben Roberts and Jacob Rodriguez play Marcel Reed and how that secondary for not just Texas Tech but A&M guard up against. For A&M, they'd have to guard Reggie Virgil and Coy Eakin, and for Tech, they'd have to guard Casey Conception, Terry Bussey, and Mario Craver. It would be the battle of Texas schools, also that are known for pumping money into their programs and primarily using that to get their best recruits. At least that's what the common perception is, and there is a lot of truth to that. No shame to them, though. All power to them. They have great staffs, great rosters. This is semi-realistic. Not very. It is a very, very small chance of happening, but it's more realistic than Ole Miss or any of the G5 schools or Oklahoma being featured in here. So a Lone Star Showdown with a twist. We then have Miami versus Texas Tech. The spread here would be Texas Tech -2 about per FPI. This would be the battle of D-lines galore with Miami and Reuben Bain Jr. and Texas Tech with David Bailey. This channel will make you a college football expert and help you enjoy watching games and make more accurate predictions. So what are you waiting for? Like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, comment your thoughts, and watch the video all the way through so that you can get the full package. And check the description and pinned comment for more ways to help yourself and this channel. Going up against, for both of these teams, a rushing attack that has been inconsistent throughout the year, but also shows upside, and quarterbacks who have been inconsistent. It's really the battle of inconsistent offenses with upside against defenses that have shown time and time again they're the far better side of each offense. Don't really have a name for the specific rivalry, but it would be really fascinating and interesting, and you do have that little side piece to it that these are some of the top spenders of the sport, and they're some of the most well-known teams for being big public spenders. We now have Texas A&M against Indiana. Indiana is not a chaotic scenario based on seeding or based on expectation or what the books think. They are, however, a chaotic scenario based on the fact that no team has won it all without at least 50% of their roster being made up of 4 or 5-star players before. That's the blue chip ratio rule. So that is why I included them in here. According to FPI, Indiana would be favored by 10. I think this would be a nightmare matchup for A&M. Indiana would run outside zone on them all day long. Indiana would easily get pressure on Reed, and if they held Ohio State to 10 points and just over 300 yards, they would hold A&M to around 200 yards and possibly fewer than 10 points. That'd be very hard to do, but it would be doable with that defense. And offensively, they could probably go over the top on A&M too. It'd be a bad matchup, but I would be curious to see how a defensive mastermind in Elko handles and game plans for Fernando Mendoza. I would also be curious to see what A&M's offense could do against an Indiana defense, because I think Indiana could realistically hold them to single digits, and I'd be curious to see if that's actually true. Miami against Indiana would be a little bit more intriguing because it would be more balanced in the trenches, and Miami's defense at least can hold a candle to Indiana's. I think Miami would fare better against the top teams, for example, than Texas A&M would. The FPI spread here would be Indiana -8. No, I do not think Indiana would handily beat Texas Miami or blow them out in the same way they could A&M. I do think Indiana would win, and I'd be pretty confident about it, but it would be a low-scoring, close, physical game. That's for sure. I think Miami has a really good shot of punching above their weight class. That from a recruiting angle is inappropriate to say about Indiana, but in terms of the teams that would be favored over them or power rated over them, they have a chance to punch above that with their style of play. And that would, I think, create a game very similar to either the Oregon-Indiana or the Ohio State-Indiana game, where Indiana wins, but they don't win by more than probably 10 points or maybe 14 points here, because I do think Indiana is better than Miami, and I also think Oregon and Ohio State are both better than Miami. I'd be curious to see, though, if Indiana could get the same TFLs and sacks against Miami that they did Ohio State and Oregon. Also be curious to see what Ruben Bain Jr. does against Carter Smith. For the next chaos scenario, we have Alabama against Texas A&M. What I would be interested in here is, okay, how did Alabama get through that bracket? I mean, Texas A&M, yes, too, but from public perception, I would be just as curious as to how A&M got through their bracket as for Alabama. But I think for a lot of people, Alabama getting through that bracket would be really shocking with how that game against Georgia ended. And Alabama would actually be favored here per FPI by about 1.5 points. So that matchup between two conference foes that have played every single season until last year, from the time A&M joined the SEC, it'd be a bit of a reunion, and one that could be fatal to any school. A&M has struggled at times with defense in general, but with Alabama's porous run game, they might be able to really turn it up against that offense. I do not think that Alabama's defense would be a good matchup for an A&M, though, unless they were willing to run read and the offensive line came to play. The last chaos matchup is Miami against Alabama. Miami per FPI would be favored by about 0.5 point or a point here. So it could be a pick 'em. I didn't want to be boring, so I went with Miami being favored since they would be favored by a fraction of a point, and I rounded up to 1. The Crimson Tide would have a rough matchup trench-wise with Miami, but they have the better secondary, the better wide receiver core, and probably an equivalent quarterback here. Also, we know that Kalen DeBoer has handled Dan Lanning. We know that Dan Lanning's a better coach than Mario Cristobal, although maybe not by as much as some people say. So I think there would be a coaching edge to Alabama here, but being owned in the trenches would really go to Miami's benefit. And it would again be fascinating to see. So Miami and Alabama are road teams in their first round games, and somehow they match up for a national title. That would be fascinating. Again, I don't think these are realistic, but they're realistic enough to be part of the conversation. I thought this would be a fun exercise to go through and say, hey, these are some possible combinations. What do you guys think about them? Here's some brief thoughts that I have on them. Let me know which combination you think is the most likely, or if you're picking any of these combinations to happen, let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. It's my mission on College Football with Sam to make you the most informed, knowledgeable, and entertained fan as possible. We aren't perfect, but we hit the nail on the head more often than we hit our thumb with the hammer. Make sure to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, comment, and if you're here, you've probably already watched the whole video. So thank you for doing those things.